Today we speak with Mike Boylan, the creator of Mike's Weather Page. Found at spaghettimodels.com, it offers a comprehensive collection of tools and data to track weather events. Mike's Weather Hero journey is truly inspiring. What started as a side project in 2004 has grown into a trusted resource for weather enthusiasts, emergency responders, businesses, citizens, the military, and many others. Mike's dedication to providing accurate and accessible weather information earned him the prestigious Governor's Hurricane Conference Tropical Meteorology Award in 2021. He is the first private citizen to have been awarded this honor, making his achievement even more remarkable. Mike's Weather Page helps countless individuals and organizations prepare for and respond to natural disasters. As you'll hear, Mike's humility and passion shine through as he tells his story. We even get a little weather geeky towards the end as we discuss various hurricane modeling efforts. Mike is well versed in this subject. Join me as we get to know Mike and hear his story. Welcome to Weather Heroes. Today we're lucky enough to be joined by Mike Boylan, the force behind spaghettimodels.com, also called Mike's Weather Page. And Mike, welcome to Weather Heroes, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love to talk weather.
Oh yeah, we're so excited to have you. I can't tell you how many times in my past role and many of my comrades would look at your information. It's such a good set. It's the way it's put together. It's really comprehensive, and it gives you not just, for example, the hurricane season, what the hurricanes are all about, but some of the post events as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an evolution, that's for sure. I mean, the first year I made the page to now, it hasn't changed much. It's just a lot more links.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll discover a link that I forgot I even have. I got so many things on there I found over the years.
That's really good. I tell you, well, we appreciate it. So, so a vote of confidence right out the gate, buddy, So Weather Heroes is really about the heroes themselves. I consider you a weather hero. In the opening, we talked about the 2021 Governor's Hurricane Conference Tropical Meteorology Award, first time given to someone with a role like yours who's putting out a product of Mike's Hurricane Page. That's a pretty special achievement, Mike.
Well, yes, thank you. When I found out it was actually had to be voted on by folks in the National Weather Service and different board directors that they have, it was really humbling. Everybody knows I'm not a, quote, meteorologist, so it's always been a fine line and a role that I've kind of played and at least have some respect. Now that was before Hurricane Ian came out. That was in 21, right, in early part of the year, and I think back to what we've had since that with our state. Living in Florida, it's been very active since before that. Right. So yeah, that was a good moment. I was really proud of.
Well, congratulations again on that. I see that you, like I, am a native Floridian from the Tampa area, or I think we talked about earlier, the Bradenton area.
Yes. Yeah, I was born down in Manatee County.
Manatee County, very good. So I see that you started Mike's Weather Page 2004, and that happens to be the year 4, as I like to call it, 4 hurricanes. What was that? Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean?
Yeah, I never looked at it that way, but you're right. That was the big 4. And for us, Charlie was the first one heading towards Tampa Bay. And I remember it was before Google was even around. I think there was a cow like Lycos or some search engine, and I remember I ran across spaghetti models because everybody was so amped up about Charlie coming to our area,
Right.
And I would run across something, and then the next day I couldn't find it, and I'm like, where the heck was that? I want to see those models. Well, ironically, I was taking a HTML class at USF.
Okay.
I was dabbling a little bit with tables and columns and rows, and so I kind of threw this thing together and threw a few images on a page and called it Mike's Weather Page, real genius, and really shared it with friends and family for 2 years. I didn't even have a domain name at the time. It was on backdoor of another website that I had, and it was hidden. So yeah, it was more of a, and in fast forward 21 years, it's still the same concept. It's just first thing I do when I roll out of bed is look at the page and look at what's new and look at the SPC, look at the latest spaghetti, everything. It hasn't changed much.
Now, for those folks not familiar with SPC, that's the the storm
Storm Prediction Center, yep.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Which whenever these models were shared years ago, and I love
Right.
their graphics. I love
Yeah.
their outlooks and levels of categories, and it
Yes.
kind of gives you a generalization of, okay, this is kind of where we got things brewing,
Right. Right.
I love them. I think they're great products.
Oh, very good. And they give the fire weather, some other things like that. That's very helpful too, especially for some businesses trying to look at all that type of stuff. And the other thing would be is when I look at that, I think more like, oh, this is kind of like the more of the forecast. Then if you look at the hazards piece of that,
Right.
and which is the National Weather Service, I say, well, this is actually, hey, this is almost real time.
Oh yeah, they do their little mesoscale discussions, which I think I geek out when I see them because they're up to date and so a lot of what I'll do is once an event's happening,
right.
I like looking long range. I like looking at what's coming, what's next, and
right.
Real time. I kind of just kick it all back to them. Like to me, there's no point in me forecasting real time info. I like sharing stuff like that.
Sure,
but I really get into the long range forecast, especially with hurricanes.
Right.
They really can't. I mean, there's a lot of wrong, and as much as being wrong, you're right. You can't really go out that far. But I love 10-day forecasting, and all the trolls tell me make the weather a day away, 10 days away.
Well, I got to tell you, if you've gotten that award, you're probably doing something right.
Well, we're all learning. I mean, they get it wrong too. Weather is not an easy thing to forecast.
Rocket science is easy compared to predicting the weather.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, just this week here at home, we had all these hatch warnings for the Panhandle, and it looked bad, and we didn't even have one.
Right.
Like I think we had one tornado warning, and it looked like we were going to get hit hard. So, yeah, it looked like the conditions were there, and it kind of didn't happen. But then weather is so crazy. We broadcast for days about this possible weather event. It doesn't happen, and then there's this letdown. People almost get mad. And you can understand why people get upset when the forecast is wrong. But then on the other side of it, do you really want a EF3 tornado over your house?
Amen. Yeah.
So it's social media is challenging with emotions.
Yeah, that's an understatement, my friend. What have you found the most fulfilling as you've been doing this for the last 20 years?
Probably just meeting people. I never really understood the impact. Going back to the comments section, let's say, 99% of the people I've met don't comment. And a lot of social media content creators or whatever you call me, if you only go off the comments, sometimes you get a lot of negativity, you get a lot of trolls. And so for me, it's been meeting people and meeting their families and how they relate to our family and maybe some impacts that they've had on forecasts that I put out and thanks. And just that's been the biggest impact. And lately it's been meeting sheriffs and fire and government officials, and I respect them with the utmost respect, and that they follow. Having FHP officers pull me over, Florida Highway Patrol, and find out they follow. That's been the biggest joy is meeting people that actually appreciate the page and are quiet online. They're watching.
Yes, well, that tends to be most of the folks are usually pretty quiet but still watching. Now, a lot of folks use your page, dude. A lot of folks that you'd be surprised. So your most interesting experience that you've had?
Well, interesting. Probably my most joyous was this year chasing snow. I don't know what it was. There was this giddy feeling of everybody down here. We had snow in Florida, and I was at a little restaurant, and I had somebody tap me on the shoulder. It was a family that not follow me, but they knew I was going to be in Tallahassee. I looked over and the kids had mittens on and hats, and they were so excited. I went to FSU. I had students knocking on my window because they recognized the truck, and they're like, "Hey, Mike, when's the snow coming?" And then when the snow came, just seeing how excited everybody was outside, and to think that weather created that, they build up. So that was a good moment. I don't know what it was about it. It just really made me happy. Maybe it's because I'm so used to catastrophic hurricanes and that. So that's and I guess the other most things that stick out the most would be the day after a landfall and the shock of residents. I think one of the craziest stories was during Helene. I met a gentleman, Trey, and we went to Keaton Beach, and his home was standing sideways, but every home around him was gone. They got hit by a 20-foot storm surge. And he was on his phone with his dad, and they lived the island over. And he was going to go check on his dad's house, and I drove with him, and we turned the corner into this neighborhood, and every house was gone. All you had was stilts. And I broke down. He broke down. And then his stories that his grandma, they grew up there in the 40s, and all his dad wanted was these deer heads that he had mounted. And we looked for hours, and there was not one sign of anybody. What I could not believe, the ocean took everything. It's like it came in, grabbed everything, and took it out to sea. There was no sign of any belonging. Well, then like a week or two later, they found the deer heads. Dad messaged me. He was so excited that somebody found him in a rubble, hundreds of yards away. So I want to do a story on that maybe now that let things settle. It just happened a few months ago, but that was a really cool story. That's all that he cared about was those deer.
Right. So have you done stories like that before?
Yeah, I'm slowly doing more of that. Following up, definitely.
Sure.
And things I can share. And, one thing I've learned too, in 2020, I started storm chasing or going to these storms, and sitting here on my little desk, you could talk about storm surge and you could talk about why you should evacuate. But unless you're there and see it, the messaging isn't the same. So now that I've been out there, these stories of why you should evacuate, what you're going to experience, and then stories like neighbors helping neighbors is something else. Is just, and I just heard it with the recent tornado outbreak. Good stories, I tell people, there's be there to help. And so I've learned these little messages help me in what I'm saying to people.
They got to be very heartening to you.
Oh yeah, real life, and it makes me believe like the little things that I worry about and bitch don't mean anything. You just see what these people went through. Like
puts it in perspective.
Yeah, hopefully it changes things. You value things a lot more than you might have for seeing somebody lose everything. And they still are happy and smiling. It makes you feel almost selfish sometimes, like what they just went through, and guilty almost.
That's a good call. This year is the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Andrew. You began, and I know big time, in 2004 with those hurricanes. Any Hurricane Katrina experiences you'd like to relate?
I was just starting out back then, and I remember listening. I think we had a power outage here, and I remember the radios. The information back then was so kind of sketchy to find information, and just hearing how that was unfolding. With the Superdome, and then maybe the levees, one of the levees, and just the water, and just how in the moment you don't really realize what's happening, and it's happening. So I had a similar experience with Ida. I went up there in Louisiana, and the storm passed. It was a Cat 4, 3. I was in a hotel at night, several hours after landfall, and we were listening to local radio, and a bunch of locals were calling in panicking. They were in a place called Laplace.
Right.
And they were like, hey, what's going on? The roads are filling full of water here. Like, do you know anything? And there was a panic in the air because it's dark. New Orleans lost all power at that time. 100% of New Orleans was out of power. So there was this uncertainty and almost like a fear, like things are still happening, And I went there the next morning, and man, they got flooded bad. Hundreds and hundreds of water rescues overnight. They had the water from Lake Pontchartrain. Just the winds pushed it, into that little community. And so it's kind of a similar. One thing I've learned too with surge and impact, sometimes things continue past landfall. Yeah. And that's kind of what happened with Katrina. The water started building, and that's what happened with Ida. And we had a flooding here in Oldsmar with Helene, and people thought the storm was over because it went to our north. And that's when the backside spin started pushing in, and people were like, holy crap, where's the water coming from? They thought the storm was over. So those are the new things that you experience.
Even the flooding afterwards, where north of you starts flooding or heading south on all the rivers, and now you get it back up.
Happened with Milton. River with Withlacoochee is still underwater 6 months later. Wow. So these are things I've been talking to the state with a lot. I'm friends with FDM crew, and the inland flooding is a big story that this year. It happened with Ian. We had the other side of Florida, Port Orange and South Daytona. They people woke up in the middle of the night with 2 foot of water in their house. So again, all the news is focused on landfall, which it should be. Sanibel Island, Fort Myers Beach got hit hard. So they're just thinking it's a other side of the state storm. And guess what? They're waking up, 6 hours later to 2 foot of water in their home, on the other side of the state because we had so much rain and had nowhere to go. So again, and what I've tried to do more with me is messaging is impacts that people might not expect outside of that landfall, that they continue well past that landfall.
Well said. That's a lot of those things that kind of creep up on people afterwards that you just don't expect. I had a few questions about models. I think we had talked about that when we were talking before. A couple of more of the geek out questions, and take a shot at these if you like. What's your take on AI models that learn from maybe some of these new or current scenario models?
Well, I followed the European last year AI model came out, and it started the season out a little rocky. And I'll tell you what, man, by the end of the year, it was pretty good.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And I don't know the ins and outs about it. I know it uses past storm data. It uses its own data collection from its own 20 plus years, I guess, that the Euro has been running. And it's able to basically think, well, this weather pattern doing this, it created this. And then it looks back at other ones. And if it didn't do that, it's kind of what our models do now. The models now look at current highs and lows, and I think they just pretty much blend ensembles and try to put together the best path, basically. Everything's highs, lows, jet streams, But the Euro AI uses a lot more history and real time. So, it was surprisingly good. I will say I was shocked. European's always good anyways.
Yeah, I'm about to say it's my favorite, yeah.
Yes, and it's had rocky years. I mean, there's been years. But yes, I think some of the models I think have gotten worse. I hate it. GFS still just is 50-50. And, every year everybody changes the models. They change, the parameters that they use. And I think a lot of the magic of what I do is you start the season out and you really digest all the models and you kind of get a feeling of which ones are just performing better than others. And
right.
We have a German model. The Icon is a great model. There's even the Korean model, the KMA model I discovered a couple years ago, and it was pretty good. And you got the UK. So it can drive you crazy, but at the other side of it, I think it makes sense when you're kind of doing what I'm doing and which ones you lean on and which, Ian was the prime example. The GFS that year was terrible.
Right.
And it kept showing the panhandle and everybody else's, all the ensembles, everything was showing. And then there was a little bit of common sense. And, we have a hurricane in Florida that time of year. We have cold fronts, and there was a lot of cold fronts that year, and they lift systems and turn systems. And it made no sense that this thing was going where it was going. And they kept skewing that cone. And unfortunately, Fort Myers was on the outer edge of that cone the whole life cycle. So everybody's trained to look down the middle of those cones, and Fort Myers folks ended up getting hit, and they were still technically in the cone, but they were on the, And once they took that GFS out of the equation, I'll never forget that the NHC discussion said, well, the GFS isn't doing good. We took it out of the cone. All of a sudden the cone went, boop, turned right toward Florida.
Yeah.
And the talking points that year was it's going to hit Friday, and it's going to be weakening in the panhandle. So everybody was thinking, okay, it's going to be weakening. It's going to be hitting on the weekend. Well, they never really thought that if it turned, now it's hitting on Wednesday as a major. Yeah. That was messaging gone wrong because locals down there in their head thought Friday, and in reality it was Wednesday. And holy crap, panic was in the air.
Yeah, messaging is so hard for the National Weather Service already, National Hurricane Center, and to have something like that doubles the.
Well, and they were never wrong. I mean, it's just. I think everybody needs to just train everyone or educate, not train, but educate everybody a little more. And I think a lot of folks, the number one thing I hear about what they like, what I do is I just give them all the scenarios. I give them my thinking. And pretty much they think for themselves. Like, I try to stay away from adjectives. I try to just lay it out there and let people in the end make their own decisions without me kind of influencing them one way or the other.
Do you think that's part of your success? Probably just laying it all out there like that.
Yeah, I think most people like, some people think the media's, and I don't think most of them are, but a lot of people think they're scripted, and they think that I'm an independent source that has no agenda. And they do like all the scenarios. I mean, it all started with Michael back in 2018, and all these models were predicting 9, 20, 30, 40 millibar hurricane. And at the time, the first initial cone showed it to be in a tropical storm. Yeah. And so people thought I was a genius, but I was just like, I'm a little worried here because there's 5 models here showing this. And I think I made a statement one time, hey, if I lived up there, I'd be taking it serious. And I've had a lot of people quote me on that. So I know the Hurricane Center is very slow to react, and they don't. It's smart to make non knee-jerk reactions. But sometimes when the modeling is so one way,
Yeah.
I've been frustrated. Like, and then they step it up.
Yeah.
Not that it. I mean, it probably works, but there's a portion of people that like the worst case. If that's what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Well, I always think to my head, okay, they got to make sure they protect life, limb, and property type stuff. So they're probably only going to be. Oh, exactly.
You're wrong.
Um,
Trust. I mean,
Better overdue. I had another question about these multi-source models. You think they're getting better? I know you mentioned some, how they've thrown multiple models together already versus the AI, but sounds like the AI, at least that one test, has been coming out pretty good, learning from itself. But how about these multi-source models?
yeah, I think a blend of them.
Yeah.
There's hurricane specific models that got really big last year. The Haas model, AB. There's a HMON and HWRF. Those are like more mesoscale style modeling, but they're
Right.
hurricane specific.
Okay.
Found very good success rate in those, especially with intensity. For
Right.
some reason, some of these operational model runs, intensity is way off. Like, so these higher scale hurricane models have been great for intensity. And I still hear old school Mets, GFS and Euro. That's the Bible, It's like, that's what but things have moved on. Like, I've had people call me out. Why are you showing the HWAR? Well, it's because it's right,
Yeah.
And then another big thing is ensembles. A lot of folks are using more ensembles, and I tend to lean on those a lot on trends. And trends are your friends in the tropics. The weather's evolving, and you got high pressures and low pressures, and you can use ensembles and then if these multi-models are sniffing it, you go with that majority. And for me, I started out just not even understanding weather. Like, I would just say, oh, here's the models. Now it's fascinating to me because I'll see an evolving high pressure or low pressure. I remember tracking Sandy, and we had a high pressure coming across Canada, and it was tricking the models. Some were going back to the U.S., some were going out to sea, and it was a race between that high pressure. Ultimately, the high pressure blocked Sandy, and it turned. And understanding that and the flow patterns of that high and how it accelerated Sandy that direction, it's fascinating.
Pretty fascinating. I've seen, like, with all these storms, each one has got their own personality, both while it's heading towards us or wherever it's going to go to, but also after it hits land or makes landfall and the impacts.
Yes, totally. and that is the challenges of messaging, because like you said, every storm has its story. Some are non-events, some are overachievers, some are more inland events. Weakening at landfall, strengthening at landfall, high moon or full moon impacts so much. Lean in the mountains with that. There was a mid-level low that came over and it stalled it, and that flooding, crazy. Harvey. We had Ian and Charlie. A lot of comparisons down here. Charlie was a teeny weeny little system that was hauling butt through the state.
Oh yeah.
And it had impacts, but nothing like Ian. And a lot of folks were like, I made it. I survived Ian or Charlie, I can handle Ian, and it was a different animal. They were both Cat 4s, but the impacts were off the chart with Ian.
Yeah, big time.
That again goes back to the messaging. And I storm chased Beryl this year in Houston.
Okay.
Holy crap, it was the most intense Cat 1 hurricane I've ever experienced in my life. And the next morning, between the surge and RV, trailers on their upside down, and I would have been that person. It's Cat 1, I'll be all right. And so yeah, again, it's some Cat 1s are barely even a cloud. Tough on that too. Is it's only a tropical storm, or only so that's another reason. We got flooded here with a storm, tropical storm Ada, that was 60 miles off Pinellas County's coast, and it just went up to the Big Bend area as a tropical storm, and we had over 500 homes flooded here. The flow, counterclockwise flow, pushed everything right up to the Pinellas County. We had a high moon.
Wow, yeah.
Went to bed that night. Next thing you know, we're doing water rescues up and down.
And even then, those deviations or differences can be very minor between the speeds and the intensity and everything else. So, what do you think of this 2025 season? A little early still, but I always say that there could be 25 hurricanes predicted, but unless one hits. But
100%. Oh my God. So, what I've learned is the public eats up the early season forecasts, and they want to know how many storms we're going to have, And just like you said, I got wrapped into this hype a couple times, and now I'm back to it only takes one, because people get so mad. Like, well, that's so stupid, but it really only takes one to define a season. Yeah. So I tell people this. All right, so you want an active year. A lot of names. Well, 23 was the fourth most active year we ever had, and we had only one storm that year. Idalia hit the Big Bend area, okay? So last year, 24 was less than 23, but we had a ton of impacts.
Yeah.
So, you can have a season with a lot of names, but don't mean squat.
Oh, yeah.
And you have an average season. So this year is interesting. So we're going to be going into neutral La Nina. Very low likelihood that we'll be in El Nino. What I've seen years that we have El Nino, we have a lot of fish storms. That Bermuda high is weak because we have a strong Caribbean jet stream that chokes off the Caribbean. Last couple of years we've had La Nina neutral. We have a stronger Bermuda high. We have more storms pushing towards the Caribbean and the Gulf, and it's just, you look at 2020, you look at last year. So that's a given. And the water temps are undeniably above normal. Now, the argument is, what were they 1,000 years ago? And I tell people, I don't care. I don't know. I don't care. I'm just saying, over the last 30 years, anytime the water temp's a little warmer, then we have more energy. And that's a given. So those two things alone, I mean, there's long range looking. I saw a really scientific post of a guy following X yesterday talking about upscaling, and the Pacific's got something going on, which means the Atlantic might have more storms. So I think they're going to officially announce a slightly above average season.
Okay.
And I'm just more concerned about the fact that what I've seen with more of these west motions because of a strong Bermuda high. And that just pretty much puts more people at risk,
Well, it certainly does. And the Gulf seems to be always warmer.
I know.
And
I don't get it.
Yeah.
That was a lot of the, there's a stat that I put out. There's been like 10, maybe 11 now, 150 mile an hour hurricanes that have hit the continental U.S., 150 mile an hour or greater. And 9 of those out of the 10, and now it's 10 out of the 11, have been tropical storms less than 3 days out. And that's incredible to think about. 10 of those 11 storms were only tropical storms 2 to 3 days out. So that rapid intensification is real. And that's where modeling is so important, because, I mean, all these storms are blowing up in the Gulf, and it's just that warm water, shallow, warm water, and get away from that.
Well, I know the National Hurricane Center has been focusing on that intensification problem. So.
Great. Well, a couple of years ago, we had Otis or something out in the Pacific. I think it was Otis. No, not one model predicted this thing to be anything but a tropical storm, and it turned to a Cat 5 and hit Acapulco, and devastated it.
Wow.
I think it was Acapulco. Not one model predicted it being a 5. And that's just scary. Again, this rapid intensification is real.
So something you think everyone should know about watching the weather?
I always open up things anymore about, don't be stubborn. Every storm's different. You got to reset your brain and then look at, like we talked about, all possibilities. And just don't think that you're smarter than the weather. I mean, when we talk storm surge, I've unfortunately know people that lost lives or loved ones in Fort Myers because, I can do it. The risks are real, and power outages are real. And I think don't be stubborn. Just look at all the risks, make your decision based on that. But just, it can be tricky. Don't think that you're above these impacts that are coming, because we see it. It's every storm, as you mentioned, is different, but the flooding, tornado risk, and even the post, what I'm learning, people that decide to stay after storms, it's miserable. You have no power, you have looting, you have smell, you have mosquitoes. These are things I tell people. Do you really want to, think you can tough it out? Like, just make a little vacation out of it. You might only have to evacuate a couple of times in your lifetime. So make the best of it,
Amen. Any final words of wisdom, Mike?
Wisdom, no. Just don't listen. When we're telling you to evacuate, and I'm storm chasing into the storm, don't judge.
Okay.
I'm telling people you should be out on the road as I'm in the road. We had a tornado here at home the other day, and I'm calling my wife and daughter. I'm like, make sure you get off the road as I'm in the stupid storm.
Right.
But no, just learn the weather. I always say get an app, get a radar. I love Radar Scope. I'm not endorsed by them. I just love Radar Scope. Learn how to read the radar. And people, the number one thing, if you want to know what's coming, understand radar and see that radar. And have a weather radio. Make sure you have alerts set on your phones and have a weather radio just for that. And that'll get you through. Kind of become your own little weather person. It makes life a lot easier. And then trust your local meteorologist. I think is a really good You know, I can't cover, you know, Mississippi counties. I don't know towns.
Sure.
When there's a weather event, you know, your local Mets are there for you, and
Right.
they're on 24/7. They know your market, they know your roads, and so, you know, give them the, you know, when you need somebody to go to them, and they're always going to be there for you. Not any national service. I really value local Mets and what they do for their residents.
Well, Mike, man, I can't tell you how grateful I am to have you here today. Everyone knows about Mike's weather page. You're a silent hero amongst so many. Huh? So,
Thank you.
no, thank you.